Well, we've been here before. They competed their butts off. A lot of good things, but fourth quarter, people up their defense, and we have trouble scoring.
This is the guy that everybody's raving over.
Because it doesn't feel like they're always playing the lineup that complements Victor Wembanyama.
Mentally, he's the toast of every town he goes to. Maybe the hype is getting to him a little. Maybe.
On May 16, 2023, the San Antonio Spurs became a different franchise. That day, the San Antonio Spurs won the 2023 NBA Draft Lottery, giving them the #1 overall pick and the ability to draft the NBA's next generational superstar. Just over a month later, San Antonio made it official and selected French phenom Victor Wembanyama first overall. At 7 feet 4 inches and one of the most hyped NBA prospects ever, he instantly made the San Antonio Spurs exciting again. Wembanyama's arrival injected newfound optimism and energy into a storied organization that has fallen on some hard times. 20 games into his career, he has backed up the hype by playing like a potential star. Despite this, the San Antonio Spurs have been the worst team in the Western Conference, including a huge losing streak. San Antonio wasn't expected to contend this season and clearly has a lot of work to do before they climb out of their recent abyss. But the horrible start has the potential to put a big dent in the team's long-term vision for a Wembanyama-led championship team. So before we get to the content, make sure you drop a like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. Now that we get all of that out of the way, cue the intro. I haven't proven myself to you at this point, then check this out. On Thursday Night Football, these are all the people that made money by following my prize picks for free on Instagram. I give out my picks for free each and every night, and if you end up tailing me and hit green, I shout you out like this. Right now, when you use my promo code microphone, you could double your deposit up until $100 on prize picks. And thank you, prize picks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? From the moment Victor Wembanyama arrived in San Antonio, the Spurs became a significantly more valuable team. Literally, it's hard to imagine a franchise needing Wembanyama more than San Antonio. The Spurs were once the gold standard in the league, making the playoffs for a record 22 consecutive seasons. That streak began in the 1997-98 season during Greg Popovich's first full season as the head coach. In over 2 decades of dominance, they won 5 championships led by stars like David Robinson, Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, and Kawhi Leonard. But beginning in the 2019 to 2020 season, San Antonio saw their record slowly decline all the way to their Western Conference worst 22-win season last year. The Spurs have never missed the playoffs in consecutive years. Now they were on the outside looking in for the 4th season in a row. So the Spurs were trying to navigate out of truly uncharted waters when they finally got their basketball messiah. Victor Wembanyama entered the league with skill and size that was different from anyone else in the league, although that didn't stop people from comparing him to the all-time greats. The effect on the franchise was palpable. Greg Popovich signed a record-setting 5-year, $80 million extension to stay in San Antonio after rumors swirled last season of an unceremonious retirement. The Spurs also got a massive increase in nationally televised games after only 4 games in front of a national audience last season. That included their season opener on ESPN against in-state rival Dallas, and they kept it close, but the Mavericks ultimately won the game by 7. In their next game, the Spurs got their first win of the season against a different in-state rival when they beat the Houston Rockets in overtime. Wemby had his first career double-double, putting up numbers that you don't typically see from 19-year-olds. They had a bad 40-point loss to the pre-James Harden Clippers in their next game, but afterwards, Victor Wembanyama had his first big moment when the Spurs went to Phoenix for a 2-game trip. San Antonio beat the Suns by a point on TNT when Keldon Johnson hit the game-winning layup with just over a second to play, completing their 20-point comeback. Wembanyama played well in the win, but his next game was his true masterpiece. He scored 38 points, going toe-to-toe with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker as the San Antonio Spurs defeated one of the top contenders in the West, going wire-to-wire, beating the Suns 132-121. Just listen to the respect Kevin Durant gave Victor Wembanyama after the game.
He's his own player, person. He's going to create his own lane. Is much different than anybody who's ever played. And you can try to compare, but he's going to carve out his own lane.
5 games into the season, and the San Antonio Spurs were riding high with a 3-2 record while their budding star and young core led them to a pair of tough road wins. But they had no idea what was around the corner. The San Antonio Spurs have not won since those 2 games in Phoenix, earning only 1 win in November. They have lost a franchise-tying 16 games in a row. Their 3-18 start is the worst in franchise history through 21 games. Across their 18 losses, the San Antonio Spurs have allowed over 120 points 13 times. In their latest loss against the Chicago Bulls, who isn't necessarily trying to contend right now, by the way, the Spurs led at halftime by double digits before falling apart in the second half, losing 121 to 112. San Antonio fell to 1-9 in games where they've held a double-digit lead. The Spurs have been the worst third-quarter team this season, with the lowest scoring average and the worst point differential coming out of halftime. One of the other main constants throughout the streak was Popovich's continuous tweaking of the starting lineup. With the losses mounting, Greg Popovich has been making major changes, including replacing 2 starters from their December 6th loss to Minnesota in their next game against Chicago. 8 players have already logged a start for the Spurs just 21 games into the season. Their 5-man lineup with the most playing time together has only played a total of 88 minutes this season. That's far below the 5-man lineups with the most playing time for the rest of the league. Another area where the Spurs have struggled is turnovers. San Antonio commits the 3rd most turnovers a game, behind only Utah and, even worse than them, the Detroit Pistons. Before their game against the Chicago Bulls, Popovich talked about his team's inability to hold on to the ball.
As a group, we've been pretty poor in that area. It's also a good idea to make shots. With this lineup, we're looking at basically we have 1 big and 4 perimeter players. There's really no point guard.
The most glaring hole on the Spurs roster is at point guard. For most of the season, they've been trying this brand new experiment, running Jeremy Sochan at point guard even though he's a forward in only his 2nd season. And the results haven't been great. Although on paper it sounds very revolutionary to try to make this work, Jeremy Sochan currently has one of the worst assist to turnover ratios on the team. The Spurs have spent recent 1st-round picks on Devin Vassell and Malachi Branham, but they entered the league as scoring guards rather than distributors. They have a veteran point guard in Devontae Graham, but he's only played in 3 games during garbage time this season and hasn't made headlines since getting suspended over a DWI charge. Instead, the Spurs really only play 1 natural point guard, and that's Trey Jones. A former 2nd-round pick out of Duke, Jones leads the Spurs in assists with 5.2 per game despite coming off of the bench. He had his best game of the season against the Chicago Bulls and has the best assist to turnover ratio amongst the Spurs that regularly play. Imagine if the Spurs were playing this poorly without Wemby. One of the only reasons for optimism for the team's long-term success is how good this 19-year-old has been in just his first 20 games. Victor Wembanyama has been averaging a double-double while leading the team in points, rebounds, steals, and blocks. The 7'4" big man is currently 3rd in the league in blocks per game, behind only Brook Lopez and Anthony Davis, and leads the league in block percentage. He made history against the Chicago Bulls, becoming the youngest player ever to score 20 points and grab 20 rebounds in the same game. Dwight Howard is the only other teenager to ever accomplish that. That being said, there are some holes in his game that he'll need to improve dramatically over his career. Like the rest of the team, he struggles with turnovers, averaging over 3 per game, which leads the Spurs and ranks 13th in the league. He's been an inefficient shooter, not unexpected for a rookie, but it's still an area where he needs to grow. He's proven to be a good free throw shooter at almost 82%, but he's hitting just 43% of his shots from the floor, and he only makes about 25% of his threes. He's a negative in offensive box plus minus, which in turn drags around his overall box plus minus, but it's kind of difficult to grade a player's box plus minus when they're on a team that is clearly holding him back. His offensive inefficiencies are so bad that his value over replacement player metric is just 0.1. Part of Wembanyama's allure entering the league was his combination of shooting, handling, and shot blocking. Only one of those 3 skills have been consistently positive so far. He's also not a lock to win Rookie of the Year. Instead of Victor Wembanyama, Oklahoma City's Chet Holmgren won the Western Conference Rookie of the Month for October and November. Chet Holmgren was drafted last year, but he missed all of last season because of a Lisfranc injury. I'm sure over time we should be seeing Victor Wembanyama wearing t-shirts defining what a rookie is, just as Donovan Mitchell did in his rookie year when he faced off against Ben Simmons to win Rookie of the Year. That aside, if Chet Holmgren were to win Rookie of the Year, he wouldn't be the first one to win it when competing against a different draft class for the award. Blake Griffin beat beat John Wall in 2011, and Ben Simmons won the award instead of Donovan Mitchell in 2018. While it would be disappointing for Spurs fans if Wembanyama doesn't win the award, Wemby himself is all in on ending the losing streak however they can. And if we're being honest, typically if two players are neck and neck in a Rookie of the Year race, typically the player that's contributing the most wins on the most winningest team will win the award. And in this case, I think it's much more likely that Chet Holmgren wins it, but just because you win Rookie of the Year doesn't necessarily mean you have a better career. I mean, if you go back to the 2009 NBA draft class, the person that won Rookie of the Year that year wasn't Steph Curry, wasn't James Harden. Blake Griffin would win it the year after. It wasn't Drew Holiday, it was Tyreek Evans. So it's a very irrelevant award if we're being honest, but a cool one to win. Now, Wemby himself is all in on ending the losing streak however he can. The Spurs share his vision as well. The Spurs have been playing Zach Collins at center next to him before Greg Popovich made the decision to surround Wembanyama with 4 perimeter players. San Antonio lost with that lineup, but playing center is something that Victor Wembanyama is eager to try again.
Of course, experimenting different areas of the game, it's always something important and interesting to me. And as I said, every game is different, but we're gonna see and try until we find a good recipe.
Thank you.
Riding a historic streak with a few point guard options and an inefficient top scorer, the short-term outlook for the San Antonio Spurs doesn't look good. With the roster he has right now, Popovich has little choice but to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. The prevailing theory in terms of what the San Antonio Spurs are attempting to do is obviously tank for another top 4 draft pick. And while this year's NBA draft isn't nearly as exciting as last year's NBA draft was, when we were already fantasizing of the endless possibilities for what team Victor Wembanyama could join, there's no question that a top 4 pick in this year's draft would help the San Antonio Spurs tremendously moving forward. And ironically, if you take a look at one of the top prospects in this year's NBA draft, it's another young man who plays the center position from France. Alexandre Sarr is already getting a lot of hype as the ideal draft prospect for the San Antonio Spurs to pair with Victor Wembanyama. And by selecting him, the Spurs could potentially have one of the best defensive lineups in the entire NBA. Ironically, Sarr's already getting some comparisons to Victor Wembanyama because of his intangibles and his length. But even if they don't select him, players like Isaiah Collier, Cody Williams, and Jacoby Walter come to mind. So at the end of the day, a lot of people are speculating that the reason why the San Antonio Spurs are playing so badly is so they could tank for a high draft pick. And in this brand new NBA, when you have a player that is ready to compete as soon as Victor Wembanyama is, I suppose there's no point in trying to play just to be a play-in team. Maybe they're bottoming out on purpose, or maybe they're actually this terrible. Regardless, San Antonio's letting all of their flaws play out this season, which will inform their decisions as they continue to shape the team around Victor Wembanyama. It's a bad start, but if the Spurs eventually want to win with Victor Wembanyama, they'll need to address their weaknesses sooner rather than later. Let me know what you guys think about all this in the comment section down below. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.